Hello, hello. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. Look, if you hear any commotion in the background, I have a little visitor who does not want to go to sleep. Her name is Zoe, my daughter. But I felt healing. I felt healing. So I thought maybe would be a good day to get on. But before I get started with tonight's discussion, and I don't want to linger too long, but y'all know what the healing room is all about. This is where we can sit and have conversations about healing and wholeness. This is the space and the place where we can have those conversations that maybe are hard to have. So, before we get started, I do want you to like, share, and comment. I would like for this live broadcast to get up. So I want you to like and share, like, share, and comment. Thank you for those who have already joined so far. Brother Charles, Sister Ruby, Sister Leslie, I see y'all. My friend Christy Cannon, so good to see you. Evangelist Christy, Sister Shirley, Sister Ruby, thank y'all for watching and sharing. So y'all continue to like and share. We want to get this broadcast up. We want to get it up, 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 up. This is good and healthy conversation. We also, I want you to tag a friend. Yes, that's right. So tag a friend. They may be able to benefit from this conversation. They may be able to glean something from this conversation. So I want you to tag a friend. And guess what? You know people that I don't know. So everybody gets to benefit. So go and tag a friend. Also, remember the goal here on the healing room is to heal together. And the only way we can heal is we got to deal. And the only way to deal sometimes is we got to feel some of those things that we don't want to feel. So please, let's heal together and continue to like, share, and comment. Love you too. And also, well, at the end, y'all know we have questions. If you like to ask questions, we have questions. So I always like to put this disclaimer up a lot of times. First, I want to say this is not therapy. So, my name is Nikisha Fleming. I am a licensed master social worker. I am a clinical therapist. Thank you, Jesus. I passed my clinical test, so now I'm a licensed clinical social worker. But I'm not your therapist right now. We're just having a conversation. I'm not offering therapy, even though this may be therapeutic. I'm not offering therapy right now to you. But if for any reason, anytime in the discussion, it becomes very sensitive for you, it may even be triggering at any moment, please exit and find somebody that's whether a family, a friend, or even a professional that you can consult with. We not only want this to be beneficial, but we also want this to be healing as well. And sometimes we know that part of the healing process can be difficult. So, if any moment this is triggering, I want you to exit and find a safe place and a safe person where you can talk to them. And also, again, this is not therapy. We're just having conversations. So I want to get that out there. So again, my name is Nikisha Fleming, and I am a licensed master social worker, and just recently passed my test. Thank you, Jesus. Just recently passed my test, and so now I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I've been in the mental health field for 2018. I graduated, so I've been in the mental health field since 2018, so about 6 years. So of course, the human mind, the human itself, humankind, we're very complex and diverse individuals. And so, also, not only am I a therapist, but I'm also a pastor's wife as well. So, I work in ministry, been married to my husband for 6 years. We just celebrated our 6 year anniversary. Whoop, whoop. And so thankful for him. And thank you to all the warm wishes. And so I see a lot of, dealings, and I see a lot of challenges that happen, in the church, in the there's such a taboo when it comes to mental health in the church. And so this is why I created the healing room, because really a lot of it is a lack of information, A lot of it is a lack of knowing. And so the healing room is geared towards providing information and also giving people the strength to have those hard conversations, and also hopefully encouraging them to go on a step further and possibly seek professional help if that is needed. So, if you saw the title when you were coming on, I want to thank you so much for the anniversary wishes. But if you saw the title when you were coming on, I want to talk about wounds talk. Hmm. Wounds talk. Thank you, everybody, for again the warm wishes. Wounds talk. You may be wondering what I'm talking about when I say wounds. So I want everybody to go and start, you know how I do. I like y'all to talk back to me. So I want y'all to put in the chat, what are wounds? What are wounds? So again, tonight we're talking about wounds talk. So what are wounds? You may be wondering, do they really talk? Remember, this is the healing room. So when we're talking about healing, we're talking about the middleman of the human. We're talking about the soul of the human. We're talking about where your mind, your will, and your emotions reside. We're dealing with that person, that part of you. Because if we can make that part of you, which is the bridge between your spirit and your physical self, if we can make that part of you well, then I believe with everything in me that we can make the whole person well. So what are wounds? And I want y'all to talk to me in the chat. What are wounds? And we're talking about wounds talk tonight. I don't want to keep you very long, but I do want to go as I feel led. What are wounds? So I want y'all to talk to me back. Good afternoon, Sister Bettina. So good to see you. Hey, Markelia. So good to see you. I miss you. Oh, that's a good one, Christina. Lasting impressions that hurt. Wounds. So that is the question. What are wounds? That's a good question. What are wounds? I mean, that's a good response, Christina. Lasting impressions that hurt. Ooh, that is good. And we're talking about the soul on tonight, so we know that there's different, and a lot of times the way I break it down with even within the soul is sometimes we look at things in the natural. So we know that in the body, right? Or when you get a wound on your skin, because most time a wound it breaks through the skin. So most of the time, wounds can look different, right? Wounds can look different. So you can have a wound that may not be as severe, that might not require a lot of treatment. And then you can have a wound that is more in depth that requires a lot of treatment. And then if you do not treat it properly, it can get infected. So, ooh, I'm talking. So, wounds, that is such a good answer. Christina says, lasting impressions that hurt. When we're talking about the soul and we're talking about wounds talk, there are parts of us in our soul, because we're talking about the soul that carries the mind, the will, and the emotions. I tell people there is a mind that we can visibly touch, which is our brain, and then there's a mind that we can't touch. And that is our thoughts, our imaginations, our memories, whether they be good or bad. And so, wounds, that is right, wounds are injuries. So, what happens normally when our body gets injured? Normally when we get a cut or a scrape or something more severe, we might need to get stitches, or we need to go to the doctor and let them look at it and clean it out or whatever. But wounds are injuries, and they can be different for everybody. And so just like the wounds, naturally we need to go to the doctor and get them clean and get them seen about and get checked on, right? Just like it is in our soul. But sometimes what happens is we don't know that we're wounded in our soul until something kind of bump up against that wound. And a lot of times, wounds happen because earlier Christina said lasting impressions that hurt. A lot of times, we get these wounds from living life. I want to ask you a question. What have been some things in your life that has caused you or left you wounded? And I want y'all to talk back to me. What have been some things in your life that has caused you to get wounded or has left you wounded, which means that's your current state now? And a lot of times we don't want to admit that these are things that have happened to me that have caused me to be wounded. These are things that I'm still dealing with, because sometimes I remember working as a social worker at a hospital. And part of me working as a social worker at a hospital was to help individuals with their discharge planning. Sometimes there were individuals who we had to order or consult with the doctor for them to provide wound care, which means that they had got a wound that had not been cared for properly, and it was so infected that there needed to be a particular machine that they needed to hook up to clean that wound, to keep them from going septic, which makes it is just gradually getting worse and worse. So, what are some things that have left you? And we're talking about the soul. What are some things that in life that have left you wounded? And again, I want y'all to talk to me. I want y'all to like, I want y'all to share, I want y'all to comment, I want y'all to tag a friend. Remember, we're just having discussion. The goal is to heal together. And so this is a space and a place where we can do that. This is a space and a place where we can do that. Yes, that is true. Wounds do need attention, both naturally and spiritually. But what are those things that cause us to get wounded? What are the things that causes us to get wounded? And I want y'all to talk back to me, because a lot of times we want to keep hidden the things that have wounded us, especially when we're over here and we're in the church. Especially, thank you, Christina. She's talking back to me. I love it. Getting fired from jobs, that can cause us to be wounded. And you may think, oh man, it's just a job. But I dare to say that what may wound one person may not wound the other person. What may cause one harm may not cause the other harm. And then sometimes what causes me harm, as I speak it, in order for me to get it, why do you think people go to therapy? What do you think people do in therapy? They pay to talk to somebody, right? They pay to a licensed, trained professional to help them sort through challenges, transitions, all that stuff, right? And so a lot of times we don't want to talk about whatever it is, and it's keeping us in a place called stuck. So we're going to heal and we're going to become whole and we're going to move forward in life, because there's greatness on the inside of us. And sometimes if we don't deal with our wounds, they will cause us to get stuck. Thank you, Sister Gracie said it came from a broken home. I can agree to that. I can share and vouch for my experience as well. I came from a home that was not what I desired, not what I expected. I grew up in a single parent household. My mother worked 2 and 3 jobs. I saw my mother struggle. Even now, saw my mother body break down. And so that can cause us to have wounds in our soul. We can feel disappointed. We can feel like we can't trust people, right? Because the people who were supposed to be there to care for us neglected us. So, wounds. What are some other things in life that can cause us to have wounds or to be wounded? Sister Cassandra says, being disappointed by people that you thought really believed in you. I never forget that time. Well, I honestly did something I didn't have no business doing, but I remember my mom said, you know what? I didn't think I would have this happen from you. I'm disappointed. And she meant well, but we don't like it when the people that love us, we disappoint them. We don't like it when the people that care for us, we let them down. Some people say relationships. And I can do a whole, do y'all remember the relationship revival we had on the Healing Room in February? It was phenomenal. We got to do a part 2 of that. It was Dr. Zoe and Pastor Takia. Well, we talked about relationships and where they originated. A lot of times relationships wound us because we misplace where people should be. I ain't been guilty of that, Latrice. Because I thought everybody that I met that I had something in common with, oh, they my best friend, right? And part of that was wanting to be loved and wanting to be accepted. So I was accepting. But then later on, I realized, this may be a person that I don't need to keep company with. So yes, that's also a good one. Death of a loved one. Yes, and while it's hard and we grieve, there's a healthy way to grieve and process. A lot of times the death of a loved one happens, we try to suppress it. And then, there's nothing wrong in the church with wanting to say, "Oh, they're in a better place." But I'm learning to just be present with somebody when they're grieving. Because I may have all the best intentions in the world to tell them, "Oh, yes, they're in a better place." But that I honestly, until I went through grief from a close loved one, I didn't want to hear that right then. All I wanted to hear was, "I understand," or, "I can only imagine what you're going through." Because all I could see was the loss, right? Family problems, loss of purpose, empty, broken promises, abuse, whether it be verbal, physical, or emotional, grief and rejection. So we got all these things, and I appreciate y'all talking back to me. So we have all these things throughout life, and a lot of y'all said something. Life itself, you got that right. A lot of y'all have said some things that we all can relate to. I think a lot of us here on this live can say, "I have felt or I have dealt with grief." And a lot of time we think death of a loved one is the only grief, but it could be the loss of a job. That's grief. The loss of familiarity. That's grief. The loss of being in a familiar place, the loss of a marriage, the loss of a relationship, that can cause grief. I think a lot of us can say that we dealt with feeling rejected in some sense, whether it's we felt rejected from our parent or whether we felt rejected from friends. We got bullied growing up. And you know what we do a lot of times with those wounds is we never tend to them. We go out through life, and a lot of it is we don't want to tend to the wounds, is because we just want it to be over. We just want it to be over. We don't want to feel the pain. We don't want to be reminded of the situation. And the reason why I titled tonight's topic Wounds Talk, put that in the comments. Wounds Talk. Wounds Talk. Wounds Talk. Lady K, Nikisha, Miss Lemon, whoever you want to call me, Sister Kiki. What do you mean, wounds talk? I want y'all to put that in the comments. Wounds talk. Wounds talk. What do you mean? I am so glad you're asking. What do you mean? I'm so glad you're asking. Wounds talk. I remember, because I'm a therapist that has a therapist, and I love my therapist. Thank you. Thank you, God. But I believe that if you're in any type of leadership, whether you're a parent, whether you have a job, however you're operating, if you are a pastor, if you are a pastor's wife, I believe that it is very important for you to have a safe outlet. And so my safe outlet is my therapist. That's one of my safe outlets, is my therapist. And I remember having conversation with my therapist, and I remember talking with my therapist, and it was some things and thoughts that came up with dealing with a particular situation that was good. And I remember with this particular situation that was good and that I was excited about, there was a part of me that had another feeling, and this feeling was letting myself down. Letting myself down. And I remember my therapist asking me, she offered a suggestion to me. She said, "I want you to do this exercise." And I'm thinking to myself, "Oh goodness, what is this?" I want you to go back throughout your life, and I want you to think of these different events, and I want you to think of what voices start coming up. that you carry. I said, okay. So I was really in depth. I'm an organizer. I like if I could plan and schedule my whole life, I would. And so I was very thorough with this exercise. And I remember that week I was just telling my husband, I'm like, oh my gosh, my therapist got me doing this exercise. And I'm just like, I don't want to do it. And I remember we went through it and stuff, and she was like, "Wow, this is very thorough," and went through it, and I was like, "Yes." But I realized that the stuff that happened to me 5 years ago, that the things that happened to me 10 years ago, still was having some impact on me even today as a woman, 30 years old. And a lot of times we go throughout life and we think because we have accumulated success, that we have accumulated accolades, that we have accumulated all these different things, that it heals the wound. But the only way to heal the wound is the first one is you have to acknowledge that there's one there. Y'all hear me? In order to heal the wound, you have to first acknowledge that there's one there. Because a lot of times we try to say, well, hey, I'm successful and I got this, or hey, I made it this far, or I made it through. And what we're trying to say or we're trying to prove, most of the time we're trying to prove to the other person that because most of the time the wounds that we have been inflicted by someone else, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally. So, in order for us to heal the wound, the first step is to acknowledge that there's one there. To acknowledge that there's one there. And a lot of time we think if we just simply ignore it, if we just simply say, "Oh, I'm blessed and highly favored," and I'm not saying that to be condescending. I'm not saying that to minimize anybody, make anybody feel inferior. But I think it's very important for it's something about, and we talked about this yesterday in our Sunday school lesson at church, and I thought it was so good. And because there's a lot of application, there's a lot of soul work that we can find in the Word of God. And a lot of times in the church, we try to separate mental health from the church. Oh, it's over here, and we're gonna put it over here, and we're gonna sit it right over here. We don't deal with it, but it's something that we have to deal with every day because it is gonna be our soul that we're gonna have to give an account for. And so, a lot of times when it comes to wounds, we want to ignore them. We want to just move on, act like it's not happening, act like it hasn't affected us. But we have to acknowledge. And again, remember I said at the beginning, there are different types of wounds. There's maybe small wounds that maybe you can clean up at home. Then, if you get a cut too deep, you have to go to the hospital, have to stitch it up. And then, depending on how damaging or how bad the wound is, you may have to get that wound some in more intensive care. You might have to also take some antibiotics depending on if it's got infected. So it's very important that we first acknowledge there's a wound. When you get a cut on your leg or you get injured on your leg, do y'all just say, "Oh no"? Do you just walk around like nothing happened, but you bleeding and people say, "Hey, what's going on? You bleeding?" No. Most of the time, when you get a cut or a scrape, you feel it, right? Or you bump your leg and you get a bruise, you're like, "Oh man, I hurt my leg. I'm not sure what's going on," right? And so we have to be mindful and we have to be conscientious that the same thing applies to our soul. A lot of us, we be in spaces and places and we're wondering, why is it that that bothered me, right? I never forget. I was working at Mississippi State University and we were doing a training and there was a new individual coming on boarding. And I remember looking at one of my I look at them as a business mentor now. But I remember looking at one of my colleagues at the time and they saw that I was getting flustered. And they looked at me and they was like, "Are you okay?" We had took a break. They was like, "You okay? You're kind of frustrated. You seem frustrated, and I never see you that way." And I'm just starting to say, yeah, I'm a little frustrated. This person, I just feel like they're doing this and doing that. And they looked at me and said, that's interesting. And I guess when you work with a bunch of counselors, they said, you might want to ask yourself, what is it in you that is irritating? And I was thinking, at first I was like, how dare they? How dare they tell me to self evaluate? How dare they do that, right? But I'm so glad they did. And you want to know why? Because it caused me to really look at myself and say, what is it in me that is irritated with this person? What is it in me that's causing what they do to impact me so much? Because that's what we got to get to the point of. What is it in me that has caused me to be impacted by this particular situation, whatever it is? Right? Because, like, for instance, some of us, we don't know how to handle being told no. What is that about? Is it that I don't like being told no because I've never been told no growing up? My parents gave me everything I want. Is it I don't like being told no because I feel like somebody's rejecting me? We got to get to the root of what is going on. And the first part to healing a wound is to acknowledge that it's there. Acknowledging that it's there doesn't make you a bad person. Acknowledging that it's there doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you have less faith, right? Acknowledging that it's there is simply just being aware that it's there so you can get the treatment that you need. And a lot of times I get people asking me this question because I'm moving to the second part. I told you I'm not gonna keep y'all very long. But a lot of times I get this question is how do I know I need to see a therapist? Right? Because there's different levels of care for wounds. Some wounds you can go to a little clinic, they get you stitched up, whatever, going about your business. Some wounds you just get you some alcohol at home, get your Neosporin and get your Band-Aid, right? And then there's some wounds that provide more intensive care. So I always tell people therapy is not just for, there's for crazy people. Therapy is for people. Because long as you're living life, you're gonna need somebody to talk to. And why not have somebody that's trained and professional? That has done work in this, who has to get continual education in this. I do believe sometimes it's important to have a therapist that's a good fit for you. But therapy is just for people, not crazy people, just people. Period. And so again, so we're talking about wounds. And so again, first part, acknowledging that the wound is there. Second part, what level of care do you need? Where are you at? If I was to ask you, whatever the wound is that causes the most disruption in your life, not good disruption, but bad disruption, that causes the most challenges in relationships. If I was to ask you what wound is that, then you would need to evaluate what level of care do you need. Is it causing you to survive or is it causing you to thrive? Because one is better than the other. Is it causing you to fulfill your purpose, whatever that may look like in the earth? Or is it causing you to be stagnant and stuck? What is the wound and what is the wound saying? Most of the time, the wound is not speaking words of esteem. It's not speaking words of build up, words of positivity. Most of the time, these wounds that we have that we carry with us. And y'all, we can be so protective of the wounds. Like, you ever go to hello, you ever go to the doctor when you're injured or hurt? And I will never forget after I had my first child and I needed my husband to help care for me. And I remember I knew my husband and I know my husband wouldn't do me any harm. But the particular place I needed him to help care for me, I was so scared. I was like, "Oh, no, 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 no." But I needed I needed the help, right? So sometimes we can be just like that, right? You ever had your child or your niece, your nephew, or a kid maybe you kept, or even yourself, you get hurt or injured, go to the doctor, or you get a loved one to help you clean you up or whatever. But first you're like, oh no, 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 don't touch it. But in order for that to be healed, you have to touch. And that's why a lot of times in therapy, it can seem like it's getting worse before it gets better. Because in order for the therapist to really do the work, especially if you need to do some inner work, then they have to go in. Because a lot of times when we've been through things in life, we talked about the shame, the rejection, the broken family, broken household. A lot of times when that has happened, the wound has not healed properly. And so we've gone throughout life, we've been resilient. We have accumulated a lot of things, a lot of awards, but the thing that really matter is being well within ourselves. That's the best thing. Peace of mind, right? Knowing how to manage. I'm not saying you won't have any anxieties because I believe you will. Because look, I'm doing the work. I have my therapist. Thankful for my therapist, and I would be lying if I said I didn't get anxious anymore. I have a therapist. I don't be anxious anymore. That's not true. But now I have the proper tools to deal with my anxiety. I have the proper I call it my toolbox, my therapeutic toolbox to handle the anxiety, right? I don't have to become so hyper vigilant that it's destructive, but I can manage it, acknowledge it, and get the help that I need. And so we have to be mindful of the wounds that we have carried throughout life, and we have to be mindful and make sure that they're healing properly. Because if a wound, and I'm talking about the wound in the soul, if they don't heal properly, then these things come up later on. I tell people our feelings and our emotions, we can't suppress them. I saw someone post this the other day on Facebook. I think it was I'm trying to think who I saw post on Facebook. But I saw someone post on Facebook the other day that suppression causes depression. And today I was talking to someone and I was telling them, like, you got to figure out what is taking up the most space in your mind. Because for some whatever from some odd reason, we think our emotions are just supposed to go away and I don't feel them anymore. And that's not what happens. The more we try to suppress how we feel, the more that it keeps coming up, keeps coming up, keeps coming up. And if we don't deal with it, that's why I say if you're gonna, in order to deal, you gotta feel. So we're gonna deal with these wounds. And we're gonna deal with those voices, right? That keeps coming in our head. That those voices that keep saying you're not good enough. Those voices that keep saying you're never gonna amount to anything. Those voices that keep saying it's your fault, right? Those voices that say if you were only done this, maybe they would have stayed around. Knowing that we don't have any control over people, right? We don't have any control over circumstances. The only thing that we can seek to try to control is how do we react and how do we respond. And that's enough to manage on its own. That is enough to manage on its own. And so I really want to give people the permission to feel and and if you're one of those people tell them, "Oh, don't feel that way. Don't be sad." Stop doing that. Stop doing that. One of the things that I try to do as a parent, I'm not perfect at this, but I try to give my daughters the permission to feel. Yes, I may feel like they're overreacting. I do. I'm be honest. In my mind, I feel like they're overreacting. Sometimes I'll be like, Zoe, I'm gonna need you to sit right here. You can deal with your emotions. Mama gonna go over here and take a time out. I'm gonna come back and check on you because it can be a lot to deal with these little kids, these little people's emotions, and deal with yours. Anybody in the chat that got kids, you understand, or have kept kids, you understand. But we have to acknowledge, we have to deal, we have to feel in order to work through these emotions, to work through these wounds. And I'm here to tell you, if you don't heal these wounds, if you don't go through the process of healing, eventually to wholeness, then it's gonna come back up. The same way with these feelings. I tell people feelings are they're always alive. You can try to bury them, but they're gonna come right back up. And a lot of times we look at emotions as good and bad, but I try to encourage people to look at emotions as just emotions. Yes, every one of us on this live would love to be happy and love to be energetic every day. But the bad days teaches us to appreciate the good ones. So I try to just say these are just emotions. Yes, they're uncomfortable. Yes, they might not want to feel these things, but my emotions or my feelings are like my dashboard on my car. When that engine light comes on, it lets you know what's going on. And that's something that's going on could be big, it could be small, but you have to most of the time take it to a mechanic to find out, right? And so the same way we should look at our emotions, but in order to deal with the wounds, we have to feel. And because in order for us to replace that voice that is talking, right? That's talking to us, that voice that is bullying us. And most of the time, that voice is associated with who caused the wound or what caused the wound, right? So, in order for us to deal with that voice, then we have to acknowledge and seek the proper help. So, So that's what I want to talk about tonight. Normally I can go on and on and on, but I want to keep y'all too long. So again, like and share this broadcast. Want to try to get back going back with the healing room. Again, I know I've been kind of, out trying to get my bearings and but I'm trying to slowly come back. Trying to slowly come back. So I think it's important to know your season and know when it's a season to kind of step away and take care of yourself and do what you need to do. Because last year was or this last year, last season, however you want to put it, was a lot of transitions. And so I'm feeling better. I'm feeling like I'm kind of getting my bearings, but I definitely want to make sure that I'm not putting too much more back on my plate. So yeah. So I want to open up the floor again. Our goal is let's heal together. I want to open up the floor for any questions. Any questions? So again, we talked about what wounds talk. We talked about how the wounds are all different. The wounds are all different, right? The wounds are all different. So any questions? I while I'm waiting to see if there's anyone who has any questions, I want to also throw out there that at our church in Pontotoc, Mississippi, we're gonna have a night of healing and deliverance. And so we'll be able to have a healing room in person. So I know I've been saying that for a while now when I've been on like, hey, I'm gonna do a healing room in person. We're gonna have one. It's actually gonna happen. It's gonna be September 1st. So stay tuned. Look on my page. Look on the church's page and the healing room page. But we're gonna have a healing room in person. We're gonna have a dynamic speaker. Her name is Evangelist LaShawn Dillard Berry, and I'm so excited to have her. She's such a graceful, sweet, but she's a firecracker for the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm excited about that. But so we're gonna have a healing room in person. Yes. So I do see a question here. First, I want to acknowledge this comment says sometimes we allow our own self into emotions and they get the best of us. That's true, Ruby. Sometimes we can be our own worst enemy and that causes us problems. That's true. I think it's also important, and this goes with this question. It says, "What causes frustration to come?" I think that's a good question. I think I can only speak from my personal experience. What causes frustration to come from me is a lack of patience. I notice that I get so frustrated when I'm impatient. And also when I'm anxious too, causes me to get frustrated because I told y'all, like I said, if I could plan every minute of every second of my life, I would. And so because I'm like that, there's a lot of unknowns that happen. A lot of unknowns that happen throughout my life. And so one of the things that I have to do and I have to be mindful of is that what is within my control, right? What can I control and what I can't control? A lot of times the things that I get frustrated about are the things that I cannot control. So I have to release those things and say, okay, let me focus on what the things I can control. And if it's a situation that's long term, that's causing a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, and other things that are going on to it, then it wouldn't hurt to talk to a professional. Sometimes you just need to talk. It's just good to just check in with somebody. You may think, oh, things are going great. It just may be good to just check in with a professional. It's always good to have. I say it's good to have more than one safe space. That's just what I think. That's just my thought. I think it's good to have more than one safe space. To have those conversations. So, hope that answers your question, and I hope that helps. Any other questions? Any other questions? I'm glad that helped, Brother Charles. That is true. We do have to take the time to find ourselves and love ourselves. And that's a journey. That's a process, right? I'm not who I am January 2023. I was 29 years old January 2023. I turned 30 February 2023, but even in August 2023, I'm not who I was in February. So we change, we evolve daily for the good is our hope. But there also can be things in our life that can cause us to evolve for the bad. You know, if we feel rejected, then we may feel the sense to isolate ourselves. If we deal with, loss, then we may feel like, well, I'm not even going to try because the last time I tried, this is what happened. So there may be a fear of even trying. Yep. Any other questions? Well, if there's not any other questions, I just want to take the time to say thank you for tuning in for tonight's healing room. We're going to try to get this back started. Normally, we'll come live on Monday, but we'll try to just see. I might pop up on a Monday, pop up on a Saturday, but who knows? Again, I just like I said, I just want to thank you for taking the time out to um tuning in and having the conversation with us. I know sometimes it can be hard. So, oh, I have another question. I want to answer this before I go. It says, "What about violence?" Are you asking what about if you've experienced violence, or what about if you're in a situation that is violent? Because I think the biggest thing when it comes to violence, any type of violence, whether it's abuse, anything where your safety is at risk, I think that's very important to make sure you get to the nearest place of safety. Right. So safety is definitely very important. And so if your safety is at risk, then it's also important for you to make sure you get to the closest place of safety, whatever that looks like. It looks different for everybody. That may be a family, a love member who you feel safe with. It may be that you need to go to a professional place of safety, such as a hospital, law enforcement. So always remember that safety is very important. And if you know of anybody whose safety is at risk, then make sure to call the necessary parties to report that, right? Because we don't want to have that on our conscience. So if a situation of violence, again, I think is very important to make sure whether it's verbal, physical, emotional abuse. Now, of course, physical abuse, you want to get to the nearest place of safety, right? And a lot of times, if we have experience, if that's the question too, if you experience violence, then for a significant traumatic event, I mean, trauma is trauma. Everybody has their own trauma, right? And again, what affects me may not affect someone else. I think it's very important to make sure number one is going to be safety. Safety is going to be important. That's the top thing. Making sure you're safe, right? Because if you're in any type of environment where you're not safe, then all the other things are not going to help. You can still go to therapy, but if you're in an environment that's not safe, it's not going to do much good to be going to therapy if you're still in the situation or the environment that's causing the damage, okay? So it's going to be very, very important that you, number one, go to the nearest safest place, okay? And I'll have some resources popped up on the screen at the end. That's going to be very, very important to go to the nearest safest place. And then number two, after you have done that, it's going to be also very important that you go through the healing process that needs to take place. Seeking a counselor, if you need to go to the hospital or whatever, doing that. And I hope that answered your question. If that didn't, then put some more in the comments and let me know. That's a good one. So also when you're dealing with people, and these are such delicate situations, right? Because how many of us know that someone else's trauma can sometimes become our trauma? That's why I have to have a safe place to talk to. That's why I'm big on self-care, because when you're in a field where you're dealing a lot with people and you're dealing a lot with, yes, they tell you their secrets and they tell you their brokenness, but at the same time, it can impact you as well. And so you have to take care of yourself. And so anytime you're dealing with an individual who's at risk of taking their own life, then you have a due diligence. And that due diligence is, hey, if they're not willing, the best thing is if you can go with them to the emergency room to get themselves evaluated. If someone is coming to you and say, hey, I think I want to take my life, or I'm having thoughts, then you don't need to take that lightly. Okay, don't need to take it. And in the church, we got a bad, or it's a demon. They need help. Yes, we may know something is working in the background, whatever, but they need help. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that they get the help that they need. And so you have a due diligence. If someone comes to you and say, I feel like harming myself, you take them, ask them if they would like to go. You go with them. I think it's important. Don't just try to send them. They need to go. I'm going to send them. No, ask them if they want you to go with them. Make sure they go to the hospital and get themselves evaluated. It's better to be safe than sorry, right? I know we live in a culture where a lot of people want to put everything on social media. Yes, and sometimes it may feel like it's the little boy cry wolf. But again, I dare say it's better to be safe than to be sorry. And again, I'm going to flash up some resources. If it's someone who they're struggling, they're having these thoughts, they don't have a plan, there is a suicide prevention lifeline that they can call. But again, if someone's coming up to you and they're expressing these thoughts, then I think the first thing, of course, you can ask them a series of questions. How long have you been having these thoughts? All these things. I think it's important for you to take them, go with them to the hospital. And if it's you yourself who is having these thoughts, right? If you're having these thoughts with depression and I've struggled with wanting to take my own life, then number one, go and seek help. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you a bad person. And if you're crying out for help, then there's something on the inside of you saying that I want to live. I want to live, and I want to see what my life is going to be. And so if that's you, whether you've had someone to express as a loved one that, hey, I'm having some thoughts of suicide, hey, or you yourself are having those thoughts, go and get help. Go to the nearest emergency room and say, hey, I'm having these thoughts. I need help. And they should have someone on staff to evaluate you. If not, I'm going to also I want you to know towards the end, I'm going to pop up the suicide prevention lifeline for you to have. It's a simple 3-digit number, 988. You can pick up your phone and dial it, and it will send you straight to somebody who can talk to you. Everybody's life everybody who's on this live, who's watching now, your life is too important for you not to fulfill everything, every idea, every plan on the inside of you. Right? What if the person who created the light bulb didn't make it to that flourishing? Right? And you may say, oh, somebody else would have created it. But it was destined for that person to create the light bulb. It was destined for whoever created the MacBook and the HP. It was destined for them to do it. So you have too much purpose and too much life on the inside of you for you to take it prematurely. So I hope that helps. And again, I'm going to flash up some resources. Again, my name is Lady K, and this is the Healing Room. And remember, our number one goal is to heal together. So I see you next time. I don't know when that next time will be, but y'all stay tuned for announcements on my page and the Healing Rooms page. Also, go and follow Good Shepherd's page as well. And go and support us because God is doing some amazing things there. So I love you. Peace. And remember, let's heal.